Welcome back to Killer Stories. I'm your host, Bobby Holmes. I want to give a big thanks to KM Jewelry for sponsoring another episode of Killer Stories. Kyle Megan Elliott is the creative mind behind KM Jewelry. She designs and handcrafts each piece. Her favorite materials to use are polymer clay, leather, faux leather for our vegan peeps, and resin. KM Jewelry is affordable, quality, comfortable, and definitely on trend. On her website, you can find a wide variety of rings, earrings, and necklaces. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see the gorgeous pieces flashing across the screen. I will, of course, share it on my social media as well. She has a Sweetheart and Love Bites collection for Valentine's Day that are so stinking cute. I am wearing these macrame feather earrings, and I love how lightweight they are. I can't even tell I'm wearing earrings. Now through the end of March, you can get 15% off at shopkmjewelry.com using the code KILLER15. Kyle also offers free shipping over $40 within the US. I'll leave the link to shop as well as the discount code in the show notes. Once again, that's shopkmjewelry.com with the discount code KILLER15. This week, I have a story suggestion from listener Natalie Gilbert.
Hello, my name's Natalie from Wales in the UK. I'd like to request the Petito case, please. Thank you.
I've had many suggestions to cover the Gabby Petito case while it was ongoing. I don't like to cover cases that are still under investigation because there are so many unknown variables. I don't want to speculate or cause any additional stress on the family members going through such an awful situation. Having said that, this case is still very fresh and still has a lot of unanswered questions. Natalie, as she stated, is from Wales. This case might not have been as prominent across the pond as it was here in the States, let alone where I live in Utah. It happened basically in my backyard and was front page news for months. My parents were visiting during that time and were exploring the Grand Tetons while Gabby was missing. So eerie. If you are totally confused as to what I'm talking about, don't worry, I'm about to lay out all the details for you. Let's start with our victim, Gabby Petito. She was born March 19th, 1999 in Blue Point, New York, a small coastal town on Long Island. She grew up in a blended family. Gabby was the oldest of 6 siblings and half-siblings. This is a tongue twister. She attended Bayport Blue Point High School. The summer after high school graduation in 2017, she moved south to Carolina Beach, North Carolina. This was a common thing where I grew up as well. A lot of kids wanted to get out of their small town and work in a tourist hotspot. You can make great tips as a waitress or bartender in these towns. She lived in Carolina Beach through 2019. She moved back to New York after her North Carolina adventures, and that is where she reconnected with Brian Laundrie, a high school friend. They bonded over their common interest in nature. Both of them loved to travel and explore the outdoors. Gabby had always been a traveler. All through high school, she vacationed in different areas throughout the United States. And during her senior year, she took a trip to Costa Rica. While living in New York, they spent a lot of time together on the beaches of Long Island. Not surprising by their age group, they both had a strong presence on social media, especially Instagram. I'll be talking a lot about Gabby's Instagram account, @GabsPetito. It's the best way to follow the timeline of events. Not to mention she was basically a professional photographer. Her photos posted from her travels are amazing. It might help if you hop on and get a feel for Gabby's lifestyle. Brian's Instagram, @BizarreDesign, is no longer available to view, which is a bummer. At this point in time, Brian was still living in New York, but his family had relocated to Florida. In March of 2019, Gabby and Brian moved to North Point, Florida, where they shacked up with his parents. It was nice to live rent-free and save money for their future. His parents welcomed her with open arms. They loved Gabby like a daughter. Both Gabby and Brian started working at the local Publix, which is a drugstore/grocery chain. Gabby worked as a pharmacy technician and Brian in the grocery department. Then COVID hit. And if you haven't followed the case numbers in the US, Florida wasn't doing so hot. Both Gabby and Brian decided to quit their jobs. After all, they didn't have any major bills to pay. They were living with Brian's parents. I find it curious that they quit their jobs at the start of the pandemic, but decided to take a road trip from New York to California. But then again, they tended to camp out on their spots and avoid the crowds. Gabby and Brian had a blast exploring places like Las Vegas, Yosemite National Park, and Pismo Beach, California. In July of 2020, while on a trip to Georgia, Brian proposed to Gabby. She said yes. Brian shared the happy news on his Instagram page, and knowing how this ends, it makes me sick to hear these words. The caption of his photo read, "My biggest fear is that one day I'll wake up and it will all have been a dream, because that is what every second has felt like since the moment we found each other. Till death do us part, or when I wake up. I'm so happy the answer was yes. Love you, honey." The newly engaged couple was excited for their next adventure. They purchased a 2012 Ford Transit Connect van and began the process of converting it into a camper. Fast forward to June of 2021. Gabby's dad moved to Florida so that he could be closer to her, although he was still about a 3-hour drive away in Vero Beach. Heck of a lot closer than Long Island. Not even a month later, on July 2nd, Gabby and Brian set off on their next road trip. They were super excited to be in the Ford Transit instead of being cramped into a tiny car. The plan was to drive from Florida to Portland, Oregon. They would sightsee along the way and celebrate Halloween in Portland with a friend who lived there. Along with the regular post to Instagram, they filmed the trip to put on their new YouTube channel, Nomadic Static. You can view their channel, but there's only one video uploaded, and honestly, it's super sad to watch. They look so happy. But we all know the Instagram versus reality memes. Social media is rarely ever a proper representation of someone's life. You always smile for the camera. First documented stop was Kansas. Both Gabby and Brian posted photos to their Instagram from Monument Rocks. They shared their excitement about living #van life for the next few months. Brian said, "Sacrificing space to wake up in nature every day has been no sacrifice at all." From Kansas, the next time either of them posted to social media was 4 days later in Colorado Springs, Colorado. From there, they drove south to Great Sand Dunes National Park, arriving on July 10th. Gabby was very excited about this location. She posted, "After going on our first road trip across the country in my tiny car, we felt like there was just so much we missed. Turning this Ford Transit essentially into a camper was such an adventure in itself, but I couldn't love the way it turned out more. All the places it's brought us so far have been amazing. As soon as we got to the Great Sand Dunes, I didn't want to leave. There was so much to hike. But as soon as the campsites on the dunes open up for the summer, they fill up instantly, along with the overnight parking permits. Lucky enough, I called at the right time when someone canceled, and I was able to score us a campsite for 2 nights overlooking the dunes. I'm so grateful we got such an awesome spot to spend the night and surf the dunes. And the night sky here was insane. Never seen so many stars." The next state to explore on their road trip was Utah, where I currently reside. We are blessed to have many, many breathtaking national parks. Their first stop was Zion, where they hiked and explored the Narrows. From what I gather, following their journey on her Instagram page, they spent 4 to 5 days there. The next time she posted was July 21st in Bryce Canyon National Park. Same thing, another 4 to 5 days in that area before moving north to Monroe, Utah. Monroe houses one of the biggest tourist attractions in Utah, Mystic Hot Springs. The hot mineral water in the spring is 168 degrees Fahrenheit, but that water flows into smaller pools with temperatures between 92 and 102 degrees. You have to make reservations to use the soaking pools. There are 2 larger concrete pools and 6 vintage cast iron bathtubs that look like they are built into the side of the red rock. It's beautiful to see. Gabby posted a picture of her in the vintage tub on July 26 with the caption, "I took a very relaxing nap here." There's another photo of her and Brian standing in the spring and kissing. Again, according to Instagram, they are both all smiles and seem to be having a great time. From Monroe, they drove to Canyonlands National Park. She posted a picture of her without shoes hiking through the canyons. She commented that Brian always hiked barefoot and he inspired her every day to live a more natural lifestyle. Her last post from Canyonlands was July 31st. The timeline makes it seem like they spent quite a bit of time there because her next post from Arches National Park wasn't until August 12th. And these 2 parks are relatively close. Canyonlands to Arches is only about a 30-minute drive. And I mention this because it seems strange to stay in one place for 12 days when they have typically only spent 4 to 5 days in each area. And not to rag on Canyonlands, but in my opinion, it doesn't have as much to offer as, say, Zion. The same day these pictures were posted, Gabby and Brian were stopped by police in Moab, Utah. A 911 call was placed by an onlooker. He said outside of a grocery store, he saw, quote, "a gentleman slapping a girl. They ran up and down the sidewalk. He proceeded to hit her, hopped in the car, and they drove off." He provided the make and model of the van as well as the license plate number for police. Another source stated that Gabby was the one who was the aggressor. She was hitting him with her phone and attempted to crawl in through the van's window as if Brian had locked her out. An officer located the Ford Transit van driving on the road into Arches National Park, right before the gate. He noticed the man behind the wheel was driving a bit erratic and was potentially intoxicated. The van then struck the curb, and he turned on his siren. Once pulled over, Gabby and Brian explained their situation to police. First of all, both were completely sober. They were having an argument. Okay, totally understandable. I know my husband and I can't do a 3-hour road trip without an argument, let alone a month on the road. The officer asked Gabby to get out of the van, pulled her aside, and asked for her side of the story. I'm going to play you a clip from the body cam footage. I'm sure most of you has seen at least a portion of it on the news. There's some background noise from traffic, but you can still make out what she's saying through her sniffles. She's obviously shaken up.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just some days I have really bad OCD, and I was just cleaning and straightening up the back of the van before, and I was apologizing to him and saying, "I'm sorry that I'm so mean," because sometimes I have OCD and sometimes I just get really frustrated. Not like mean towards him. I just I guess my vibe is like I don't be like in a bad mood. And I was just saying, I'm sorry if I'm in a bad mood. I've just been really stressed. I had so much work I was doing on my computer this morning.
What do you do for a living?
Well, I used to work at an organic juice bar, but I just quit my job.
Okay.
I was a nutritionist. That's what
okay.
that's my
That's
job.
cool.
And I just quit my job to travel across the country, and I'm trying to start a blog. A couple blogs and stuff. So I've been building my website. So I've just been really stressed, and he doesn't really believe that I could do any of it. So that's kind of been like a, I don't know. He's like down there. I don't know. We've just been fighting all morning, and he wouldn't let me in the car before. And then
Why wouldn't he let you in the car? Because of your OCD?
Told me I need to calm down. Yeah. But I'm perfectly calm. I'm calm all the time. And he really stresses me out. And this is a rough morning.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't I sit you down in the back seat of my car? You're not in any trouble, okay? I'm not going to be putting handcuffs on you. You obviously don't have any weapons. I'm going to get you into the air conditioning, let you take a breath, relax a little bit, and then I'll come back and talk to you in a few minutes, okay?
Okay.
Alrighty.
After placing Gabby in the back seat of his patrol car, he asked Brian to step out of the van. Visually, he has a fresh cut and scratch marks on the right side of his face. He explained that he struck the curb because Gabby reached over to grab the wheel when she saw a police car behind them.
So, tell me what's going on.
She just gets worked up sometimes, and I try and really distance myself from her. So, I locked the car and I walked away from her. What happened this morning is that she's trying to start up her own little website blog and everything. So I give her time. We really had a nice morning with everything, if anything, but she just got worked up as we were trying to get going and get our day going because we want to go like bars before the assembly time.
Okay. You want to tell me about those scratches on your face?
She had his cell phone in her hand. That's why I was pushing her away, because she wanted me. I locked the keys so I could walk away. I said, let's just take a breather and let's not go anywhere. Let's just calm down for a minute because she was getting worked up. And then she had her phone and was trying to get the keys to me. So I got in the way. I was just trying to. I know I shouldn't push her. I was just trying to push her away to go. Let's just take a minute, step back and breathe. And she got me with her phone.
Can I see your hand? Oh, you got a mark right here.
Oh, that's from a wire.
That's from a wire?
Yeah.
You want to tell me about hitting that curb?
Hitting the curb was her grabbing the wheel.
She grabbed the wheel?
Yeah. She said, I can't believe we're getting pulled over, and then she grabbed the wheel.
What about the speed? Did she take over the pedal on you?
If I was going fast, I'm sorry. No, it's probably just the moment of, I'm still shaking now. The adrenaline, seeing the lights flashing up, and then her gripping the wheel. So if I sped up, I'm sorry about that. Or if I was speeding beforehand, I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, it took quite a bit to catch up to you. So,
yeah. I'm sorry about that. We're just going into the park again to get water because we have a 6-gallon water container to fill up. So we're just grabbing water for the hike. Okay. And I was trying to keep everything calm and quiet because there's plans still to go for a hike. But I'm really sorry about that.
Brian annoyingly remained very calm and polite throughout the whole video. He's a good actor, I guess. Brian and Gabby both stated that they were engaged to be married and loved each other. It was just an argument that escalated and neither party wanted to press charges. Police said that the incident appeared to be more a mental and emotional break than a domestic incident. Gabby suffers from severe anxiety and OCD. In the end, the officer requested that they separate for the night and cool down. Brian stayed in the van and Gabby in a hotel. We'll touch more on this event and how it could have been handled differently in a bit. August 17th, Brian flew back home to Florida alone. Even though they were currently living the van life, their home base was with Brian's parents. For whatever reason, they had put some of their items in a storage unit while they were gone. He flew back so that he could move everything out and close it up. His lawyer later reported he did this so that he would have extra money to extend their road trip. Because it was going so well. While he was in Florida, Gabby stayed at the Fairfield Inn and Suites near Salt Lake City. On August 19th, she uploaded the first video on their YouTube channel, Nomadic Static. Brian was gone for 6 days, flying back to Salt Lake City on August 23rd, where he met back up with Gabby. The couple checked out of the hotel on August 24th. Throughout this trip, Gabby was in pretty constant contact with her mother, Nicole Schmidt. Gabby called her on August 25th and said their next stops were going to be Grand Tetons and Yellowstone National Park. This day was coincidentally her last ever Instagram post. While traveling north from Salt Lake, they stopped in Ogden, Utah, where she posed in front of a butterfly mural. Since we are no longer able to follow her trail via social media, the information for the next few days are from eyewitness accounts. August 27th, Gabby and Brian were seen at a Tex-Mex restaurant in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. The waitress described Brian as angry and aggressive. She approached the table and they seemed to be having an argument about money. Brian ended up screaming at the hostess and causing a scene. After they left, Gabby came back inside crying and apologizing for the way Brian acted. Someone else reported a slow-moving white van with a young white male behind the wheel acting weird. They said the van was in the Spread Creek campgrounds of Wyoming, August 26th and August 27th. This was just a concerned citizen reporting weird activity. They had no idea how important this information would become. August 27th, so still the same day as the fight at the Tex-Mex restaurant and the reporting of the slow-moving van. A text message was sent from Gabby's phone to her mother. It read, "Can you help Stan? I just keep getting his voicemails and missed calls." This message seemed very strange to her. Stan was Gabby's grandfather, and she had never called him by his first name before. On August 29th, a woman named Miranda Baker and her boyfriend saw a young man hitchhiking near Coulter Bay Village, which is a developed area near the Grand Tetons. He said he had been camping there for days and asked if he could hitch a ride to Jackson, Wyoming. About 30 minutes into the drive, the couple mentioned they were going to Jackson Hole, and he freaked out. Before they could explain to him that Jackson Hole and Jackson were the same place, the man forced them to stop and got out of the van. He gave the couple $200 for the 10-mile ride, which Miranda found very strange. They weren't expecting any payment, just trying to help him out. Definitely a weird encounter, but she didn't think much of it until she later saw his face on the evening news. She was like, "Holy shit, that's the guy. That's the guy we picked up." This prompted her to make a TikTok video explaining her encounter with the person of interest, Brian Laundrie, which of course went viral. Brian hadn't finished hitchhiking. Later that same day, still the 27th, another witness stated that she picked up a young man from the Jackson Lake Dam area around 6:30 p.m., dropping him off at the entrance to the Spread Creek dispersed camping area. They reported that the man acted very antsy and was adamant that they drop him off at the entry to the campsite, even though it was miles away from his van. He gave them gas money and jumped out of the car. Guys, this is 2021. Now 2022. Stop hitchhiking and stop picking up hitchhikers. I've covered enough murder cases that start this way that you should all know better by now. The very last contact Nicole Schmidt had with her daughter Gabby was on August 30th. A text came through saying, "No service in Yosemite." First of all, they were headed to Yellowstone, not Yosemite. Secondly, it wasn't like Gabby to send such a short message without further conversation. 2 days later, on September 1st, Brian Laundrie arrives in Northport, Florida in the Ford Transit van, alone. Remember, the couple had planned to spend Halloween in Portland, Oregon, as in October 31st. It's September 1st. Why was the road trip cut nearly 2 months short? And more importantly, where is Gabby? I Googled the distance. It's a 37-hour drive from the campground in Wyoming to Northport, Florida. Could it be done in 2 days? Technically, but by yourself, without falling asleep at the wheel? Doubtful. More than likely, he started the drive on the 29th, and this made the text to Nicole from Gabby's phone on the 30th very suspicious. It's becoming more and more obvious that Gabby was not the one who sent that text. Her parents had no idea that Brian ended the trip early and came home without her. Nicole assumed that they were still camping somewhere without service. She began to worry on day 8 of not hearing from Gabby. She reached out to Brian. No response. Okay, if they were together, it made sense that he wouldn't have service either. Then she tried to contact Brian's parents to see if they had heard from the couple. No response. Now, that was strange. The Laundries had always been friendly towards her, and there was no reason they should be avoiding her calls. She eventually discovered that Brian had returned to Florida, and Gabby did not. No one was talking, which screams guilt. If they had another fight and split up, just say so. What was he hiding? On September 11th, 2021, Nicole Schmidt became very concerned for the safety of her daughter and filed a missing person report for 22-year-old Gabby Petito. That night, the local Northport police officers went to the Laundrie home to question Brian. His parents answered the door and, without saying a word, handing them information to contact his lawyer. Now, why would Brian already be prepared with a lawyer? It's obvious he did something to Gabby. The story of the missing van life vlogger captured the attention of every news outlet in the country. The story exploded on Twitter and TikTok, bringing in thousands of tips. The whole world knew he was responsible for her disappearance. Brian Laundrie quickly became the most hated man in America. Protesters gathered outside their home shouting, "Where is Gabby?" day in and day out. Her parents publicly begged Brian to speak up. He was the only one who knew where to find Gabby. He was her fiancé. She was supposedly the love of his life, and now he's avoiding any and all conversation about her. The Laundrie home was put on 24-hour surveillance. Brian wasn't under arrest. He wasn't even a suspect, only a person of interest, and he unfortunately has the right to remain silent. September 13th, Brian was seen leaving his home. On September 15th, the family car returned and the person who walked back into the house shielded their face from the media. Investigators assumed this was Brian. But the Laundrie said the person getting out of the car and walking inside that day was actually Brian's mother, Roberta. September 16th, the body cam footage from the police stop in Moab, Utah on August 12th was released to the public, raising more questions about her disappearance. The next day, Chris and Roberta Laundrie called police and asked them to come to their home. They explained that Brian had been missing since the 13th. That's 5 days. Missing? Gabby Petito is missing. This bastard is on the run. He's hiding from what he did, and his parents know so much more than they're letting on. They let 5 days go by without saying anything to law enforcement. Come on now. All the previous tips I mentioned started flooding in. The suspicious white van, the young white male acting weird, and the hitchhiking. Now the FBI is conducting a dual search. First and foremost, searching for Gabby, but also they are trying to hunt down Brian so they can try to get more information out of him. His parents gave a location where they thought he might be. It was a vast area just 30 minutes away from their home. On September 19th, the remains of Gabby Petito were finally discovered. After 2 days of searching the Spread Creek dispersed campgrounds, a canine led law enforcement to her body. The autopsy report stated that she had been dead for 3 to 4 weeks and listed the cause of death as blunt force injuries to the head and neck with manual strangulation. This missing person case has officially become a murder investigation. September 20th, the FBI swarmed the Laundrie home. Chris and Roberta were escorted into an FBI van while the home was searched. They obtained Brian's computer hard drive and some articles of his clothing to use as a scent for the canine search dogs. Both the Ford Transit van and the family car were seized and taken in as evidence. The search for Brian Laundrie was put into high gear. They began a search of the 24,000-acre wilderness park where his parents thought he might be. It came to light that Brian had used Gabby's debit card August 30th through September 1st, and these were the days he spent traveling from Wyoming to Florida. The purchases exceeded $1,000. This was considered intent to defraud, and it led the U.S. District Court of Wyoming to issue an arrest warrant for Brian Laundrie. The search for Brian continued day after day without any results. September 25th, a reward of $30,000 was offered to anyone who was able to lead investigators to his whereabouts. Rose Davis, a friend of Gabby's, came forward with information about Brian. She stated that he had problems with jealousy and on one occasion took Gabby's ID from her to prevent her from going out to a bar with friends. Rose said, quote, "He's got these jealousy issues, and he struggles from what Gabby called these episodes, where he would hear things and hear voices and wouldn't sleep. When I saw that Brian was back from the trip, That was the first thing that popped into my mind, that Brian had one of his episodes, and I was just hoping he didn't have a snapping moment," unquote. Rose said that Brian knew how to survive in the wilderness. He once lived in the Appalachians by himself for 3 months. She believed he was somewhere out there. September 27th, Chris and Roberta Laundrie finally speak to the public, but their words were less than helpful. All they had to say was they didn't know where Brian was and they hope he is found soon. The case continued to grow cold. October 1st, another body cam video was released to the public. This was from the second officer on site during the domestic abuse stop in Moab. In this video, Gabby explained how Brian scratched her cheek with his fingernail when he grabbed her face to push her away. Now let's talk a little more about this stop. Gabby's death may have happened no matter how the officers handled the situation in Moab. But one of the responding officers, Eric Pratt, was sick with guilt when he heard about her murder. Having said that, he believes he reacted appropriately. He really thought this to be a mental break versus domestic abuse. Price Police Captain Brandon Ratcliffe disagreed. He was a third-party officer brought in to investigate the footage. They responded to a 911 call describing an assault. There were marks on Brian Laundrie's face, and both he and Gabby admitted she hit him. At the very least, Gabby Petito should have been arrested for domestic assault. They thought they were protecting her by avoiding charges and temporarily separating her from her fiancé. If Officer Pratt did see this as a mental health crisis, it was his duty to give Gabby information on how to seek help, which he did not. In the footage, Captain Ratcliffe found at least 8 violations where the situation was mishandled. He recommended that both officers receive at least 8 hours of training on conducting domestic violence investigations and writing reports after the recommended probation period. Again, would Gabby Petito still be alive if she was arrested and taken into custody that day? No one can answer that. Back to the search for Brian Laundrie. On October 5th, his sister Cassie made a public statement begging Brian to turn himself in. 2 days later, Chris Laundrie finally stepped in to join the search for his son. Seriously? He's been missing for nearly a month. October 20th, a medical examiner was called to the Carlton Reserve, where they have spent the past 2 weeks searching. An area that was previously underwater revealed what seemed to be human remains. Not far from the remains, investigators found a backpack and a notebook that Chris and Roberta said belonged to Brian. It only took 1 day to confirm the remains belonged to Brian Laundrie. The cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head and was ruled a suicide. January 21st, 2022. Literally like 11 days ago, police released information from Brian's notebook found near his remains. He used it as a journal and wrote that he took responsibility for Gabby's death. He admitted sending text messages from her phone to her family members, misleading them into thinking she was alive. The FBI has officially closed the case, stating, quote, "The investigation did not identify any other individuals other than Brian Laundrie directly involved in the tragic death of Gabby Petito. The FBI's primary focus throughout the investigation was to bring justice to Gabby and her family," end quote. Gabby's parents started the Gabby Petito Foundation, where money is raised to help find other missing persons. You can follow her mother, Nicole Schmidt, on Twitter at NikkiSchmidt927 to see her posts on missing people and how you can help. After Brian Laundrie's journal came to light, Chris and Roberta's attorney spoke up stating that neither of them will be charged in connection with the murder of Gabby Petito. No, they didn't kill her. Brian did that all by himself, but there is a little something called obstruction of justice. This includes making false statements to officials or withholding information pertinent to an investigation. They most definitely knew more than they were letting on. They knew he did something to Gabby. I understand the need to protect your child, but if your child murders an innocent person, someone you also loved like a daughter, it's time to step up and do the right thing. Now, a touchy subject. This case was talked about in the media as missing white woman syndrome, saying that young white middle upper class women get way more media attention compared to women who are not white, women of lower social classes, and missing men or boys. And to be honest, it's true. Over 710 Indigenous people went missing in Wyoming alone this past year, and I can't name a single one. But Gabby Petito being a young white female is only one reason this case got so much attention. First of all, if you're listening to this podcast, I'm sure you understand the rise in popularity of true crime stories. So when a case is on the news and you find out Gabby and Brian's social media content is public, as well as a YouTube video to flip through, the armchair detectives dove in deep. Eyewitnesses making viral TikTok videos about their encounters. Then came the audio from the 911 call and police body cam footage. There was honestly a lot of information to keep the public updated on. I do see how people can be upset at the amount of attention brought to Gabby's case, but her mother, Nicole Schmidt, is working hard to help missing people of all ages, gender, and social status to get the same attention. I hope I did this case justice. When I posted my sneak peek on Monday, so many of you expressed your excitement for this episode. I'll be honest, doing a case this recent was somewhat difficult to write. I wasn't sure which articles had the most current and correct information, so if I missed something or got a detail wrong, try not to slam me too hard on YouTube, okay? Before I go, I wanted to read another 5-star review from listener B.S. Jones 531493 on Apple Podcasts. I love listening to your cases and you're straight to the facts. I have a case that I would love for you to do. The murder of Officer Robert Owen, Erie Police Department in Pennsylvania. Still unsolved. I got you. You had me at Erie. I grew up just 2 hours south of there. And another review left in response to the guy who didn't like my arrogant British friend, Aloha 052110 said, I just wanted to disagree with the previous reviewer. I found your podcast by listening to British Murders and I love you both, especially like when you broadcast together. Sunglass emoji. I'm glad because Stu and I enjoy doing it. Thank you for your 5-star review. You can leave a written review on Apple Podcasts as well as a rating now on Spotify, and I greatly appreciate those that do. Don't forget to visit Kyle's website at shopkmjewelry.com and use the code KILLER15 to get 15% off your handcrafted jewelry. If you are enjoying the show, you can visit buymeacoffee.com/killerstories and support me by making a one-time donation. They are set up in increments of $5 as if you're buying me a congratulatory beer. Speaking of which, thank you to Natalie, who suggested this case, for the beers. Cheers! Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Killer Stories Podcast, and I'm on Twitter at Killer Stories PC. You can email me any written story suggestions or send an audio recording to me to play in the episode like Natalie did. Love hearing your voices. killerstoriespodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, this has been a killer story.